we did by the time the program was completed for me, it was 2,500 pages worth of processes and everything that had to happen. They said, this is too complex. They did the true paperweight test. Yeah, there's too much paper for me. Reduce it. They didn't even read it, just reduce it. So I cut it down to less than 1,500 pages. And they said, great, we'll take it. And then all of the stuff that you wrote, we're not going to use all of that because it was too restrictive. And so if you think FedRAMP's hard now, the way I wanted it to be, there was no agency authorizations. It was straight up just the jab, nothing but. And that ruffled a bunch of feathers. But nonetheless, it still got rolled out and they made those changes. And I've never been happy with those changes, but it is what it is, but you roll on, and but here we are, 15 years later, and this program has not been, it's exactly the same, with the exception of the agency issue, but it's exactly the same as I drew it out. And 15 years later, the government hasn't figured out a way to screw it up yet.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another Paramify podcast. I am your host, Kenny Scott. I'm with my co-host, Mike Schreiner.
What's up, everybody?
Today, we're really excited. We're talking to Dave Fairburn Jr. He's better known on LinkedIn as the Father of FedRAMP. He's the original architect and author of the FedRAMP program, which created the first government-wide approach to cloud security under FISMA. So he's got over 25 years of experience in cybersecurity, and he's the founder of CyberPros LLC. Dave helps cloud providers navigate complex compliance and nail FedRAMP on their first try, just like the Batman Lego movie. And we're really excited to dive into the origins of FedRAMP, his lessons learned, and what's next. Dave, thanks for coming. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it. Wow, Lego Batman reference. That was quick.
Only the best episodes get the Lego Batman references.
Oh, wow. Well, I cannot disappoint then.
I love it.
Yeah.
So, Dave, let's jump straight into it. You in one of your posts on LinkedIn, you said you felt like FedRAMP was kind of your baby. We would love to hear, not words you hear often, but we'd love to hear the birthing story, all the way through.
Birthday story.
All the details. Yeah, all the details, the stress, the breathing, all of it.
Well, I did it. Well, okay, well then buckle up.
Okay.
So back in 2010, the Obama White House had issued a Cloud First initiative, and that's when the federal CIO, Vivek Kundra, he's like, okay, we have to do something with this, right? So they decided they wanted to stand up FedRAMP, and that's what they called it. I looked at it as a kind of a weird compilation of things they were trying to do initially, and they were working with some of the scientists over at NIST. Peter Mell is the primary there, and they were having a hard time getting the ball rolling. So a Fed that I had worked with over at Department of Energy, his name is Warren Udy, and he's also out in Utah now, by the way. And but he had seen that together, him and I had done something similar at Department of Energy on a not cloud related, but more on an enterprise related program, and it was working. It was working great. And so he called me up and he says, Dave, do you want to do this FedRAMP thing with me? Because the DOE folks just detailed him over to GSA because we had ruffled a lot of feathers. But that's what we do. When you're trying to drag somebody kicking and screaming, that's what they're doing, and so they're just, doing whatever they have to do. So Warren got detailed over there. He calls me up, says, let's go. So I go over there and we're meeting with all the feds that are there that are in charge over at GSA. And almost to a person, the GSA folks were like, I got one of three responses as we spoke about this. One is, I have no idea what you're talking about. I don't know. The other was, and this was disheartening, was I don't want to have anything to do with this program. It is a failure from get go. It's a waste of time, effort, and resources. GSA people. And another one who told me, I don't care what you do, it's never going to work. I'm never going to work. Well, now we go on, 15 years later, these people have made quite a good penny, from FedRAMP. So I guess what I'm really trying to say is you're welcome. So, so Warren and I developed the program part. I had another guy, Tony Maris. He was with me, been with me for 25 plus years. And so Tony was my NIST guru. He could quote NIST chapter and verse, and he kept me honest. Warren, who was the Fed, where everybody else said they didn't want to have any part of it, he jumped up and said, I'll take it. And so he ran that gamut, that political gamut, and he used up a lot of political capital on this. By navigating that with DOD, NSA, DHS, GSA, everybody. And so finally we got to move him. And then we took us 5.5 months. And these are 5.5 months of 16-hour days. And, to get it to where it was ready to go. So we started in May. We're done before December. We did by the time the program was completed for me, it was 2,500 pages worth of processes and everything that had to happen. They said this is too complex. They did the true paperweight test. Yeah, there's too much paper for me. Reduce it. They didn't even read it, just reduce it. So I cut it down to less than 1,500 pages. And they said, great, we'll take it. And then all of the stuff that you wrote, we're not going to use all of that because it was too restrictive. And so if you think FedRAMP's hard now, the way I wanted it to be, there was no agency authorizations. It was straight up just the jab, nothing but. And that ruffled a bunch of feathers. But nonetheless, it still got rolled out and they made those changes. And I've never been happy with those changes, but it is what it is, but and you roll on, and but here we are, 15 years later, and this program has not been it's fundamentally it's exactly the same, with the exception of the agency issue. But it's exactly the same as I drew it out. And 15 years later, the government hasn't figured out a way to screw it up yet.
That's awesome. No,
Despite
we
efforts
love
or no?
Yeah,
despite
well,
their best
I love
efforts.
well, I spent 30 years as a government contractor, and I've
Okay.
seen some really crazy things happen. And it's not, these is government people, so they're morons. It's none of that. It's the bureaucracy that is government gets in the way of so much progress. And so, you try to do great things, and the bureaucracy just kind of stamps it out. It's not a particularly good environment to develop something like this. So nobody's more surprised than Warren and I, that this thing has been going on forever.
Yeah. I I'd love to know when you're getting into something like that. Like we joke all the time about how much FedRAMP sucks, and what we usually mean by that is FedRAMP as a process sucks. As a security standard, it's actually pretty awesome. Like it's very, very comprehensive and thorough, and it actually does provide genuinely great security. So when you guys were originally setting out to build out, what was the approach? Because that's obviously a really widespread, project to have to tackle. Like, what was the original approach to say, hey, how do we cover everything that needs to come in here for cloud service providers?
Well, keep in mind that back then, cloud service providers were fairly limited. It was the big boys, the Akamai's at AWS and Google and Microsoft and so on. And Rackspace was one of the originals as well. And so we treated it like, any other FISMA type engagement, but in the cloud, because there wasn't a whole lot of interoperations going on, not a lot of interconnectivities, between third party solutions and whatnot. They all had it all built, into their environments. But the hardest thing to get over was the one mandate that everybody seemed to agree on the federal side was we don't want to be the Department of FedRAMP. And they beat that into us because every time I would start to do this and we would start making progress, they'd go, well, wait a minute, we're going to have to staff 20 people? Are you kidding me? 20 people? Young? Yeah, yeah. Right now, you've got, you know, I don't know, 20,000 people doing this in the government. So, yeah, 20 people. And to me, that's a good amount of, and we could have done it jab only, 20 people, no problem. But they didn't want to, they
Wow.
didn't want to go that route, and again, I'm sure there's budgetary reasons for that, management overhead and stuff like that they didn't want to deal with, which could be why the jab is not, really part of it anymore.
Okay. What's interesting to me is hearing the whole 16 hours a day for 6 months. And it's been really eye-opening for me working with folks in government and how much they care and how much they want it to succeed. Um, you don't hear about that a lot, all of those efforts.
Yeah.
So it is just the way that the structure is, the bureaucracy, that's what happens. And I think that's probably what drives a lot of the cloud first adoption because they know that, the the latest technology that's not going to be built in tech in the government anymore, right? It's
Right.
usually in the private sector, right?
Right. And sometimes they don't speak the same language. The private sector has, they have their own mission and they have their own risk appetite. And across the government, every agency and program office within that agency, they all have their own different risk appetites that they're willing to accept. And so that's one of the reasons why I didn't want to have agency sponsorship to be in. Well, I wanted sponsorship, but I wanted it to go through the jab. Yeah, because that way we lost some control over that. But,
Mm,
yeah.
makes sense. And I know too, when you're building something, I've been a part of building a few things. Paramify, obviously, we're building now. When you guys were building FedRAMP, I think the principles are the same. But everything I've been a part of that's been building, there's been times along the way where it feels like, this thing might fall apart. Like, is this going to accept it or not? Like, did you guys have those moments with FedRAMP when you're, 16-hour days, day after day, that it's like, is this even going to happen? Is this thing going to crash and burn?
I'd say we had those, issues maybe once a week, where we would go through because there was just always this barrage of new requirements or naysayers, people who didn't understand what we were doing, and and people are people. It has nothing to do with their expertise. Just people are people, and they don't. That not everybody likes change, and or if they don't understand it, the quick response is no. So we hear those things all the time, and Warren and I would sit in his office, and we had three whiteboards, and it would take up about 20 feet. And these whiteboards were nothing but decision trees and, requirements mapped to these. And then what type of evidence are we going to ask for? Who's going to be in charge of that evidence? How do we keep the three PAOs honest? How do we, it's just, there was everything, that we had to think of. And the beauty about our relationship, meaning mine and Warren's, we had worked together in a pretty hostile environment and we were successful to a degree. It's all kind of, you know, how it works out. But he was able to kind of keep the naysayers at bay, and again, I'm not kidding when I say used up his political capital, he used it up. Yeah, that's how much he believed it. And when you've got somebody on your team who's like, he would tell me, Dave, you're a bulldog, but you're my bulldog. So this is what we're going to do. Go do it. And I'll make sure that nothing happens to you. And he did. And he did. And then FedRAMP came and, Warren retired shortly thereafter.
Yeah, that's a great story. I love how the parallels between just a startup and, this was kind of a very entrepreneurial thing within government, right? You have those moments where, hey, this is the best thing ever. This is totally going to work. And then you're going right into like, well, I guess I better polish up the resume. I think this I think it's over, right? I think, yeah, it's over. And so we have those moments all the time. Just recently, right? We're like, "Oh, okay, it looks like, everybody's like super worried. Especially, there is some change happening, but I don't think it's happening as fast as people think. There's a lot of misinformation today. Um, I want to ask you a little bit about
Mhm.
the beginning. So, Dave, like
Oh,
engaging the
mhm.
three PAOs, how was that? How was the decision process made there? Like, who would be a 3PAO? What would they need to do? How was there an existing precedent for this, or were they already doing audits, or what?
No, oh no,
Yeah,
no, no,
yeah.
no. So the concept of a 3PAO was truly it was Warren's concept, and I pushed back on it because what I wanted were those 20 people to be in essence the 3PAOs. You know, we're going to do it all. And that way we would have control over the risk profile. We would have control over um, the ability to accept risk on behalf of the government universally, at a certain standard, which you lose when you go to the agency model. Again, they're all different, right? So when the three PAOs, they hadn't come into an existence yet, because we didn't know what we were going to do with them. We're like, we know we need people to do these assessments, but I don't trust anybody out there. We saw our own contractors. Some were great, some were horrible. You never know till you start getting into it. So we came up with a set of requirements, and we wanted to make it as difficult as possible to be a 3PAO. Excuse me. And the reason for that was I didn't want somebody saying, "Oh, this is an easy way to get into the government and get access to that, and look at all the money we're going to make and not do a good job." So I wanted to make it hard. So Warren and I would sit there, and I'm like, if I put my bad guy hat on and I'm a 3PAO, what do you want me to approve, Mr. Customer? Oh, yeah, absolutely. That looks great. And just keep writing it off and accepting everything and everybody taking my word for it. And Warren, I guess he had just finished watching The Watchers. And, he says, "Well, who's going to watch The Watchers?" And I'm like, beautiful. That's what I needed. And that's where A2LA came in. So we could put all the requirements, see, you vet them. And if they vet them, and I got vetted as a 3PAO, and I'm telling you, it's like a proctology exam. It's never good.
I love those. Those are awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Nothing says a fun day out like a good watch.
That's just a
Yes.
regular Wednesday for Kenny, you know?
This is a definite,
I'm
yeah.
just I'm just gonna leave that one right there, man.
There you go. There you go. There's your opening right there.
There's the edit mark, Keaton.
Yes.
I vote Lego Batman.
Yeah,
Lego
yeah.
Batman.
I don't know. You're gonna have a hard time topping this one.
All right.
I love it.
Yeah.
So when we got the first few 3PAOs in, things started going well, and we were like, okay, well, maybe I was just a little too paranoid, which is kind of my nature, you know. And I think that if you build a security program, whether it's FedRAMP or anything else, if you look at it from the bad guy's perspective, it really enables you to get a much clearer picture of what the threat vectors look like. And then it's able to say, okay, well, this is an easy fix. We just put these things in place, and oh, that's an easy fix. Or if this is hard, we'll double up and we'll put several gates in between that, and it really helped us out.
Yeah. So those three pals, they made big business. They made a lot of money. Mike was asking this earlier. Um, so did you ever imagine, right, this would grow into an entire industry like this, like the FedRAMP industry? Is that what you thought would happen?
Because it's branched
Absolutely.
into, yeah, it's widespread now. There's tons of companies and value being built around FedRAMP in every direction. So you kind of foresaw that from the beginning.
Yeah, and we knew that that was going to happen. When you funnel all the water into a single space, like we were doing with the FedRAMP PMO, then all of a sudden, everybody's going, wait a minute, I just had to appease one person or one group. Awesome. So we knew that that was going to spark people, A, rushing to get to the table, and then B, we're going to raise that level of expertise on those three PAOs by, requiring more and more and more type testing of them versus, them just being able to say, trust me, I got this and moving on. So we knew it was going to be great. I did not think it was going to become quite the jobs program that it is now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
it
did
it
not.
has exploded. Yeah. It has exploded, and I think FedRAMP
Mhm.
20x will be even more of that. And I don't know, does it seem, like if FedRAMP feels like your baby, is FedRAMP, new FedRAMP 20x, is it like watching your daughter get married to another guy and they're like, oh man, I hope he takes care of her? Like, tell me what that's like.
Sort of, having, two daughters that did marry, people that, let's just say I went crazy about, they, the whole, bastardization of FedRAMP has been under attack forever. People have wanted to go, it's not working, change it. It's not working, change it. And that goes on every single year. There's things being said about it, and there's no getting around it. But the beauty of it is, and why I'm so like, and I'm happy with where Pete's taking this now, because the previous folks, the previous directors they were keeping the lights on, doing what you have to do, which is what it was designed to do. And then Pete's going to take it into another direction, which I am so in love with the exception of the sponsorship issue.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so tell
tell us
me,
about that,
yeah,
the
why is that
sponsorship.
important to you?
The whole reason we wanted sponsorship as a prerequisite was we didn't want, you know, everybody rushing with half-baked ideas, and then getting the FedRAMP PMO, again, only a few three PAOs. So FedRAMP PMO was running everything and getting them inundated with stuff that is never going to make it to market in the first place. And then, so we're like, if they get into a contract with an agency and that agency says, yes, I love your product and I will use it, and here's a contract, but you have to get FedRAMP authorized within X amount of time. You know, that was the whole sponsorship issue. So we knew we had a federal demand, and then we knew how to attack it from a security perspective, meaning implementing federal controls. Now, if you take that away, you get whoever, and I know how this sounds, you know, and but it's my way of looking at it. You get whoever writes the biggest check, whoever gives the biggest product away to the feds, or says, here it is, we've done all this work, trust us, it's good, you'll love it. You know, how many times have you been told that or actually said that to people and knowing that it's not the case? If you don't keep that guardrail on, things have a tendency to kind of, I call it like, dueling fire hoses. It's just a whole bunch of loose fire hoses just flocking around. If you happen to put out a fire, God bless you, but more likely you just got to fool somebody. So it- I really worry that that's going to go away.
Yeah. So what would your thoughts be? Because one thing that we see quite a bit of on our side is either companies who are really like great SaaS products and they have agencies who are like, yeah, we would use this. We just can't sponsor you. We would sign a contract, but it's too much money, it's too much time. I don't have the headcount, I don't have the bandwidth. Find another agency that will sponsor and we will also sign a contract, which is why I think you saw a handful of agencies that did the vast majority of the FedRAMP sponsorships. What would other solutions be for that? Because as we looked at it in the past, we've also said like, hey, get rid of the agency sponsorship. Like, if they want to sign a contract for it, let them sign a contract for it. Let's get rid of this requirement. But what are some other ways that we can kind of solve for both of those issues from your perspective?
Um, I don't know that there is another way. You know, I know that one of the things that they're looking at for FedRAMP, the new versions, or what it's going to be, is low impact systems. They want to take away the sponsorship for that. Well, that really opens the door for a lot of companies to jump in, and I'm less concerned with those because at the end of the day, they're low impact. In a lot of cases, it's low impact tailored, so it's even less security that needs to go on because they're inheriting everything from Azure and AWS and GCP. So, I'm less concerned with those. But once you get into the moderate level of FedRAMP systems, I don't know that there is another way to prioritize unless, well, no, because they're trying to get rid of all of the GSA folks. Well, they've really cut the PMO down. The jab is out, and they got rid of, I believe, the Noblest contract. And so the contractors that were supporting the PMO, which to me, that was crazy. Those guys actually knew what they were talking about. And I'd worked with them when all of these assessments are getting them ready for all these assessments for FedRAMP. So to me, taking it away is it's a bridge too far.
Interesting. Do you see as when it comes to the moderate level? I know the stated goals for FedRAMP 20x are we're going to start with low impact, and we're going to make these changes. We're going to hammer it out. We're going to run some
Wow.
companies through. Then we're going to talk moderate. Then we're going to talk high. It seems like everybody agrees FedRAMP low can change quite a bit. We're all on board. They're low impact systems. It's not the end of the world. Like, um, when you get to moderate, though, it seems like there's a lot of disparate opinions. Like the PMO obviously feels like that can change very similarly to how FedRAMP low can change. You've got others saying, that's got to stay almost exactly how it is, or else you'll lose a lot of the security to it. You'll lose, reciprocity with the DoD. You'll lose a whole bunch of other stuff. Like, what's your take on that? On how far these changes can stretch before they kind of get to a breaking point?
That's a great question. So I'm going back to what I was just saying. If the low impact and the low impact tailored, those are fine because typically those do not have any type of sensitive data. No PII, no PHI. It's just, I don't know. I don't want to call it useless data, but it's data that does not rise to the level of modern systems. Which, if you've ever looked at it, NIST 860 and their sheet of data types, and that determines what that category is going to be. It's pretty involved. Um, I do not see how they can possibly change that. I mean, moderate. Yeah, I'm going to go with. I would be a hard no on that, a hard no on that. And FedRAMP High, forget about it. You know, you're dealing with sensitive information that is beyond PII type information. So, you have got to have a sponsor, a federal agency that is involved in the overall process because they have to dedicate resources to it. And they have their AO, their authorizing official, who has to sign off on this. So they have to accept you know, a degree of risk in all of this. That's needed. If you take that away and people can just say, "Yep, I'm FedRAMP High, go ahead and buy it." It doesn't work that way.
Mm.
When
Yeah, you raised
you're going to
a
find
good
this
point about risk.
yeah.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah,
Keep
you're
going.
going to
Keep
find
going.
out about this too when you submit a FedRAMP package. That authorizing official, no matter where they are, what agency, even if it was the JAB, they've got their own folks who have to read and interpret your work, because they have to bring it in. They've got their own GRC teams who do things completely different than other agencies do. And when you've got all of these different balls you're trying to juggle, suddenly, there's a great big vector for error. And And that's what I see is happening. And I don't see any way around that.
Right. So if we go back to what it was in the past, we have sorry, I'm getting an echo, so it's like, oh, it's ah, yeah. 1 second. Okay, we go back through the process. So for us, we get an agency falls in love with us. They say, yes, we love this product. We want to use it. We want to put our SSP information in here, and we want our poems in here, vulns, all that stuff. This is so awesome. We're gonna sponsor you. Uh, we love this. And so we like, great. Okay. And so the agency says, hey, we like this. And then we get someone to validate what we told the agency we do. We get the 3PAO, and they do an audit that's really like, it's an expensive audit. It's really detailed. They have to meet some sort of standard. In the past, if the PMO isn't equipped, right, the FedRAMP PMO, they're not going to be able to put it through the same, like through, it felt like it was always really, really tough. Like they were always underwater, right? So we have this, like, we've done all of our work on the clouds, on the cloud service side. The agency is like, yeah, we want to buy you, but like, hey, we can't until you're FedRAMP authorized. We can't do any business here. Um, when the cloud service provider has done everything they can, they provided it in every way, but then the choke point is the JAV, or whatever it is, the PMO. I mean, that's where it gets tricky, right? Because ultimately, the agency is owned by the agency owns the risk, right? If they're putting their data into your cloud tool, like they own the risk. There's not, um, I don't know. It's just kind of a tricky situation because the FedRAMP PMO, they can't own the risk, right? If let's say there's some sort of breach, and a platoon is exposed, right? Their location and everything from some like really backwards way, like something happened, you know, it's not the FedRAMP PMO that gets in trouble. It's going to be the agency or whoever
Sure.
was responsible for that.
Right. So you got to remember the whole purpose of FedRAMP. Do once, use many. All right. And so the agency, they get that approval, they put that approval in, and they kick it over to the JAB PM, or the PMO. And you're absolutely right. Over the last several years, probably even I'll probably say probably the last 8 or 9 years, easy. The PMO is saying, wait a minute, you can't accept this risk. Look at all the mistakes that were made, or look at all the deltas in implementation. You have to go back and address that. They were kind of keeping the agencies honest, because again, like I said, you have varying degrees of risk appetite, but you also have varying degrees of capability. Not everybody understands cloud computing at all, the same way, let alone how do you secure it, and then how do I leverage that? So if, for example, if you take agency X and that AO is, you know, not intentionally, but just they're doing the best they can, but it just so happens that they're accepting more risks than they should. Well, who the hell's going to leverage that? And that was the problem with the agency ATO issue in the first place, is nobody's going to leverage that. We had program offices within DOE who didn't agree, you know. Oh, you got to have something across federal government, and have all of them agree. Well, the only way to do that is to have everything funneled to the JAB, have it all approved, and with the same level of comfort of risk that you're accepting. That went away when when it became an agency sponsorship issue. You have to keep in mind, man, if I can't leverage you, what good is FedRAMP doing? We're back to what we were doing before, which was lunacy, absolute lunacy. Companies would sell a product. We sold it to DOE, whatever that product happened to be. You guys, you guys do it was certification and accreditation at the time. I think it's gone through, four different names changes is what it is, but it's all the same, you know. And so we would spend 6, 9 months, hundreds of thousands of dollars that agency had to spend just to do what FedRAMP is doing now, you know. But they did that with every single application, tool set, service, whatever. You know, we all, you know, everybody did that. Now, picture that across, and this is at the program level, right? So now you've got, I don't know, 100 program offices in an agency and a gazillion agencies across the country. You know, that is a ton of dough wasted, wasted.
So 100 program offices across every agency. Sorry, Mike. Like that's so much.
It's a lot.
Jeez.
It was absolutely ludicrous, and that's why Warren and I, that's why we made so many people. I don't know if anger is the word, but uncomfortable. Is because we would keep pointing these things out, and there's a better
Yeah.
way. There's a better way.
So what are your thoughts then on the new? Because it seems with FedRAMP 20x, the thought is it goes back to the agencies. They'll do most of the workload there in the approval, and then the PMO will do a review of some core things and rubber stamp it. I mean, does that put companies back where we were before? How does that change
Yeah,
things?
I don't see how that's any different than where we were a month ago. You know, because that's what you were doing
I
anyway.
see.
You were doing the
Yeah.
exact same thing.
Got it.
Mm,
Very
yeah.
interesting. So on the FedRAMP 20x changes overall, then, like Kenny mentioned, there's a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of, and probably more so than misinformation, it's really misunderstanding or like assumptions that are coming out. So, like, in your summary, how do you understand the changes?
Um, they want to get rid of the sponsorship for the low impact systems. You know, we've already talked about that and what my feelings are there. But everything else that they're doing, they're just, to me, they're just it's like wiping the dirt off a pig. You know, that's all they're really doing is just making my pig nice and shiny again. You know, because nothing's really changing. Nothing is changing.
Mm, okay. So if nothing's really changing, like what are some of the things that you do like about where Pete's taking this? Because there's a lot of stuff for me. Like the thing that really resonated for me is I grew up coding systems in cloud, right? I never did some like deployment. I never did program something and put it on a CD, right? So that it could be installed like on a system. Everything has been very ephemeral for the last 2 decades, really, like since the advent of the cloud, right? So I like the idea that we can maybe leverage more automation around, that kind of matches the ephemeral nature of cloud systems. Some of the old, audit methods, you know, cater to the old ways, right,
Yeah,
of
it
doing it,
does. It
which is
does.
really tough, right?
It is.
So,
And the value is not as good.
right,
I'll admit that.
right. You're forced to describe a system that existed, like, maybe existed 2 years ago,
Right.
right? And so
Right.
that's what needs to change. And I think, I don't know, that's what one of the things that we're trying to solve. That's part of our mission here at Paramify. It's not an easy nut to crack, not at all.
No. But I'll tell you the things that I do like, you know, that he's doing to address this issue is the use of AI to go out and try to automate some of the, well, a lot of the processes, you know, that go on, but also being able to get real time data, you know, that an assessor can look at. And it's not a screenshot, it's like a JSON output, you know, and OSCAL is critical, you know, to moving it forward. But the fact that they can do that now, they couldn't do that then, you know, but they can do that now. I'm not sure, you know, where AI is. I'm not an AI guy. I mean, My intelligence is fine with me. I don't need any artificial stuff going on. So, I like what he's doing. I hope it bears fruit. I really do, because I see that will make everybody's life so much easier, and it makes sponsorship less of a problem, because now I have real time evidence that, yeah, you're doing what you're doing, and I can look at it from a PMO perspective or an AO perspective and say, you know, I can look at this and understand exactly what this risk posture of this system is today. And I'm going to get continuous reports that tell me what it's going to be like next month and so on. That part, awesome. I hear so many people complaining about, well, screenshots and, shoulder surfing and, it's not going to work. And, they get up on this bully pulpit and I'm like, well, yeah, but at the time, that's all we had.
That's all
That's
we
all we
had.
had. But now,
Yeah.
we can go a little more confidently to the automation side, and that's where I think GRC tools are going to be a huge help to streamline the overall process. Not so much in it, in reducing the time that it takes to develop the documentation, which is great, but how we can you can automate workflows, which we couldn't do before. Now if I have to make a change, I've got a definitive workflow that has to go through. And at each of those steps, there's evidence, So if you're doing incident response activities, training, or you're running tabletop exercises and stuff like that, all of those workflows, every one of them, there's an evidence of that, so that me as an assessor, when I walk in, I don't have to get, okay, show me the printout of your last incident response tabletop exercise. You know, I can look at it and say, nope, this is evidence that they actually did it. And from an assessor's perspective, it means that companies can't bully an assessor into accepting something, based on their interpretation of what they see, because this is clear as day, you know.
Makes
I
it more
can
black
see
and white.
what my all those parameters are, so
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to seeing how that shakes out.
That will be very cool. That is one of the things we love about the changes too. Is we've kind of always said one of the first things Kenny told me when I joined Paramify is you got to remember security is the goal, compliance is just the outcome.
Yep.
And Pete said it perfect. He said the less time we spend on this theater of compliance, the more we can spend on actual security. So yeah, we love that too. That'll be awesome.
Yeah. And he kind of lost me on that one.
Lost down a little bit.
Yeah, he kind of lost me on that. There's two things he said, and that he kind of lost me on, but one was a perspective, and that everybody has their own. But that was the one thing, because so I started out at a time where engineers as a whole, they hated the compliance team. It's nothing but a paperwork exercise. Blah blah blah. You want to see me get fired up? Call it a paperwork exercise. You know,
I love
because
it.
I looked at it and said, it's not. If you can't document what you have, how do you know you have it? You know, that was always my thinking on that. And I've kept telling everybody, if you can tell a story of this is my network and this is how I'm securing it, and this is the things we do over time, and these things get better and better and better over time, then there's a lot of value there. And together, you security and compliance should be like hand in glove. Because I've seen a lot of companies who are who have implemented security and are not compliant. But I've never seen a company who was completely compliant who didn't implement security. Now, keep in mind that all of these frameworks are bare minimum requirements. You're allowed to do more. You're encouraged to do more, you know. But if we have to fight this hard to do the minimum, how the heck are you going to be able to raise the bar? And I think that's one of the reasons FedRAMP has not raised that bar any higher, because we set a high one and we're driving everybody to that. But they struggle at every level.
Hmm. Why do you think they struggle? What is the thing? I mean, you clean up the mess that other consultants have left sometimes, right? That's what you
Yeah,
do.
all the time.
What are some of the, yeah, that's what you do, right? I'm pretty familiar with the same scenario as well. What do you feel is the reason they struggle the most with FedRAMP? Why is it still so hard? And, you know,
That's a great question, Kenny. So it to me, it always comes down to the expertise on the ground. You get a 3 PAO, and in the early days, those 3 PAOs, they knew their stuff, and nobody could say otherwise. But as the demand has increased, for assessors, you know, well, you're not getting 20-year vets. You're not getting any vets. In some cases, this is their first job out of college, you know. Well, I don't care how good you are, out of college, you can't follow a framework like FedRAMP and understand everything from a technical and a process perspective. You can't possibly understand it. You have to have been, to me, you have to have been burnt by fire. Those of us that have been doing this for a long time, I've learned more stuff on how to do things by doing it wrong, and learning from that lesson. That's something that doesn't exist now. And so if an assessment crew, if I've done 1 billion assessments in my company and I send out a crew and they've got one senior person and everybody else is kind of entry level, or at least that's what their work dictates, that they're entry level, then I'm not doing any value to my client. All you're doing is charging a lot of money and giving them something that doesn't even pass. In some cases, their consultants can't deliver what their own assessors are saying they can do. So, if you bring that level of commitment and understanding from the assessment perspective, then it's not as hard to do. For God's sakes, if I can do two in parallel, you know, with two different 3 pounds and different contacts at the PMO and do them and have them done at the same time, all after cleaning up after other people, you know, that tells you that the expertise that if it's utilized, will deliver in spades. But you can't, it's that whole you can't let a boy do a man's job, you know. It's kind of that thing, you can't let those inexperienced folks have that kind of weight in their decisions, or in their
mhm,
advice.
yeah. I remember
Mhm.
being an auditor in the very beginning and just having no idea, right?
Mhm.
And that's where we started, but I had a whole team of seniors and managers and the quality. I mean, I got reamed by partners like right off the bat, man. So I got experience right away, the kind that I hated, right? But I
Right.
did learn from it, right? It's a tough, if you work for a top tier firm, you're going to get that experience really fast. And I don't know, it seems like people don't like that as much. They're not super interested in getting the very best experience, but maybe I'm wrong. Probably the same.
Well,
So
all you have to do is
yeah,
is look at the job market,
yeah,
and people want to get into this because it pays well. And make no
right.
mistake, it pays well, you know,
Yeah.
but you have to deliver. And
Hmm.
if you cannot consistently deliver quality consulting and 3 PAL experiences, then who are you helping? Nobody but
Yeah.
yourself.
Nobody. And then eventually,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I I have one more question, Mike, and then I want to one more question. So what do you think is, let's make like a prediction that's sure to go wrong.
Yeah.
What do you think won't change right in the next 5 to 10 years with FedRAMP? What do you think will, your clients? What do you tell your clients? What can they expect over the next decade? Are you willing to predict on there, or I don't know?
Absolutely, because I think it's really, to me, it's, as I look at the tea leaves, so to speak, it looks like it's a little clearer how this is gonna shake out. And what I see is the advent of AI just going ballistic, and that is going to make the requirements assessment process easier. It should make the implementation of security controls easier on larger systems. And the advent of, how can I don't know how to put this. Not all GRC tools are created equal, right? Some have smaller missions than others. You look at the ones who do, all they do is everything, you know, but they don't do it well, and you got the smaller companies to do one thing really, really well, documentation management, something that you guys know about. That's great, but when you look down the line, what I see is the GRC community being able to dovetail with the agencies, saying, look, quit using all these disparate GRC tools with all these disparate GRC capabilities. At least lock in on one set of capabilities and leverage that. If you do that, then I think, you're going to see automation taking over. You're going to see the timeline for approvals down to, I would say, 30 days. You should be able to see it quick because honestly, if you can't go through a security plan in 30 days, you shouldn't be going through the security plan. You know, I've read hundreds, and normally within about a week, I know exactly what's going on according to that. You know, the automation piece is you guys are going to be able to prove beyond any reasonable doubt what's going on. And that's what an assessor needs is show me what is real right now. So that's where I see things going. AI automating the evidence collection and the implementation, and then GRC tools coming right up behind it and leveraging their capabilities to uh, extract that evidence and put it into a simple format that everybody can understand and everybody's willing to accept. Now, keep in mind that during the first month of us setting up FedRAMP, this is May of 2010. So I'm sitting in a Holiday Inn conference room in Gaithersburg, Maryland, and I've got you know muckety mucks from Google and Microsoft and Amazon and Akamai and Rackspace and everybody and they would sit there and they'd say, "Look, tell me what the government wants, we'll give it to you." But what they were getting prior to that was every agency wanted something different and it was driving them nuts. So you tell me what you want, we'll all align for that because it makes everybody happier. A rising tide lifts all boats, so I I use that same approach to what's going to happen in the future, you know. All of these good things that everybody's going to be able to benefit from are going to dovetail into a very fast process. We don't have to lower the bar at all. Now, a lot of stuff is going to hinge on, and this is where Pete and I differ, leveraging the other frameworks, commercial frameworks. That's something that they want to do. And not right away, but it's something that they want to do. And I'm looking at that going, that is a recipe for disaster. You know, because again, the whole no two program offices look at it the same way. No two companies are going to look at it the same way. And when you look at, so I have my SOC 2 report because SOC 2 is not a certification, but I have my SOC 2 report. Well, that's great. But it only makes sense to the person who did the assessment, which is either an accountant or another security person who said, yeah, you have everything in place. But it doesn't mean anything to me. If you gave me a SOC 2 report, I'm just, yeah, that's not evidence. It's the same thing with HIPAA, or PCI or high trust. They all have their own missions. If you start accepting, okay, well, they did this great with high trust, and that dovetails into how they do things in FedRAMP. Well, that's awesome. But FedRAMP is its own authorization. It's not saying, okay, well, your high trust stuff is awesome. So we're going to go ahead and take. Now, we're still going to have to go back and look at that. There's no way around it. And if you can't get uh, assessors to look at program or all the documentation that gets submitted, if you can get them to read it and understand it universally, what makes you think they're going to be able to do that at the commercial level? Where I promise you, it is at least in all of the places that I've worked with, which are dozens and dozens, Fortune 500 to mom and pop, everything in between. They all have differing levels of understanding, and you can't have that if you want to have something that is viable and sustainable. Again, this is just my opinion. What do I know?
Yeah, no, we kind of see the same. Yeah, and you've seen a lot of degradation in a lot of frameworks.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
Yeah.
go ahead,
Mhm.
Kitty.
Yeah, sorry. I agree in some ways. I think Pete's coming at it from like when we're talking low impact systems, like low impact SaaS, a lot of the controls are probably covered. Like you said, a lot of things are inherited from AWS or Google or Oracle or Microsoft, wherever it is. There's a lot that's inherited, and there's a few controls that you need to look at. And um, you know, SOC 2 is not prescriptive at all. You don't have to have MFA, you don't have to have encryption, you don't even like it's just the buffet of whatever you said you need it to be, right? So in a way, I think that that would be a mistake for moderate and high impact levels as well. I'm with you there. I think for low impact systems, if someone just needs to like schedule, like they want to book on Open Table or something, if they want to book reservations somewhere, like I don't know. I don't know. Maybe that's actually I haven't done the 800-60 on that, but you know, maybe that's not a big deal, right? So I I get it for those things, but I'm with you, right? I think to water down the requirements is the wrong thing to do. What is the right thing to do is make it easier to achieve a higher watermark, right? And make this more approachable for everybody and kind of take the scariness out of it. That's what we should be doing, not necessarily lowering the security bar because it's already, kind of bare minimum, right? It's bare
Right.
bones, right?
Now,
It
here's
has
what
to
I
be.
advise everybody, absolutely everybody who wants to go through FedRAMP. Leverage your platform as a service. 100% leverage it. So Azure, GCP, AWS, don't care. You know, they all have similar capabilities, and they all have similar tools that, for SIM and, incident response and everything, encryption. They've all got their ways of doing it. Leverage it. It's already been authorized, you know, Mm. and keep your application within that small enclave within that platform
Mhm.
or SaaS, that you're using. If you do that, your life is immensely easier, by doing it that way. Now, it does cost a little more, because they all charge more for their FedRAMP authorized platforms, but you're going to spend it either putting in um, compensating controls or doing all kinds of things because you had to have a third party vendor, who writes code for you, and they, well, that's not going to work. You got to bring them into the fold, and if you keep it all there, life is simple, relatively
Yeah,
speaking.
that's how we started until like some of the tools were absolute the worst, right? Because they go like, "Oh, I know," and some of them just suck so bad. So
Right.
yeah, you got to use authorized components for sure, but some of them are just freaking awful, right? So
They are.
like,
They are. Yeah.
I used to say, yeah, like keep it all in there, and that's how we originally were. And then we had like a real security engineer come in and say, "Hey, like compared to this other tool that's out, compared to like, Datadog, compared to SentinelOne, compared to CrowdStrike, this is like really bad, right?" So we're like, okay.
Right.
I looked at it And, the cost is a little more sometimes for the sophisticated tools, but for us, it's like worth it, right? So I agree to an extent. Like, yes, don't put your cloud storage in multiple different places. Like use S3, use EKS, use all of the things that you can in Boundary, but to an extent, some of the tools are awful, man. So
Oh
I
yeah, no,
can't.
without a doubt. So like one of
You
the
want to like
examples
make
that I
security
give is,
easy.
people like, I kind of cut my teeth on Nessus, right? And but companies were using Nessus and they are outside the boundary. Well, that was creating headaches for them and the assessors, So I'm like, well, wait a minute. If that's the case, Azure already has, their Sentinel, AWS, I can't remember what that tool's called. And they do all the vulnerability scanning there within their environments. Use it, use it. And it removes that extra lift that you have to have. And
Right.
that's just a simple explanation for a simple
Yep.
example. Others are obviously more complex.
Yeah. If you have zero capability, obviously, like there you have no. I mean, there's a lot of services available, so that's a good thing. You can choose what. All right, Mike. Sorry, man. I keep cutting you off, dude.
You're good. No, Pete, yeah. Dave, we appreciate you being on, and all the perspectives. It's gonna be fun to see how this thing grows over the next, 5, 10 years. We want to try out a new segment if you're willing to test it out with us, where we shoot you some rapid fire questions submitted from mostly real users across the United
And
States.
that doesn't sound funky at all.
All right, so first question, in your opinion, who is the most overrated quarterback in NFL history, and why is it Dan Marino?
It is not Dan
I'm
Marino. Dan Marino is the Mac Daddy. It goes Joe Montana, Dan Marino.
I'm just joking. Xavier told us you were a huge fan. We're just trolling you.
Yeah, I am. Now, if you see how it is,
No, I love it. Okay, second question. Could you beat Pete Waterman in an arm wrestle?
no, he's half my age.
He looks strong too. I
He
don't know if I would
does.
beat him in an arm
Well,
wrestle.
he goes out on bike rides across Europe. I wouldn't
Yeah.
ride a bike across the street.
That's a good call. That's a good call. I don't have any other questions. Ken, you got any other questions?
The shortest segment ever.
Yep. I think we're gonna run with that. That was beautiful. Do you think Tua's gonna do you think Tua's gonna finish the season this year? Will he start and finish the season? We can compete with First Take
Who
here.
are we? Who are we asking about?
Tua Tagovailoa. Do you
Oh,
think he
John, no, no,
finishes the?
no. He doesn't finish the season. Has he ever?
I mean, yeah, like never's a long time, right?
Yeah,
Like I
yeah.
don't know.
Well, never being able to stay on the field for a whole year, that is a long time. I guess that's a hell of a run. You know,
Okay. Dave,
I'm used
thanks
to
so
watching
much.
Marino, who was in, leg braces and knee braces and ankle bracelets and his
I
arms,
love it.
and he looked like, he looked like he was in the Batman Lego movie. Oh yeah, look at what he did. And Tua just gets beat up all the time.
Yeah.
Poor guy.
Ugh.
There were tough
Okay.
quarterbacks back in the day. Those quarterbacks
Yeah, I
took a
know.
beating.
I know. It kind of
Yeah.
peaked with Brady, at the end.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Dave, we appreciate you coming on. Thanks for coming to share and talk FedRAMP. We genuinely appreciate all your service to make FedRAMP a thing and bring better security to our nation's data. So much appreciated. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
Yep. So.